In the garden, there's a caterpillar and a snail, and they're basically best friends. They hang out 24/7. They do dinner, movie nights, crafts. Oh, and they're like really into cosplay on top of like whatever else caterpillars and snails do, like eat leaves or something. Anyways, one day they're on their way to a party that's right outside the garden, and they have to go through the fence to get there. So the caterpillar goes right through, but the snail is stuck. Her shell is just too big and it won't fit under the wire. So she's like, crap, I can't get through. Maybe like, can you lift up the wire, or maybe we can build a little bridge or something? And the caterpillar's like, dude, just go under. But she can't. There's just no way that the shell is gonna fit. And the caterpillar's like, go under, come on, we're gonna be late and I'm trying to hook up with that super cute ladybug. But it's not happening. The shell will not fit under the wire, and at this point, Snail's getting kind of frustrated because it's not like she doesn't want to go to the party, but for some reason, Caterpillar just isn't getting it. Yeah, it's not that easy for me. I just can't crawl under the fence like you can, so I would really appreciate your help here. Maybe we can like go a different way, and this just like sets the Caterpillar off. What the heck? Just because I can crawl under stuff doesn't mean that I have it easy. Do you even know what it's like to have 16 feet? You don't, because finding shoes is a complete nightmare. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm not saying you have it easy. I'm just saying I can't go under the fence because of my shell. That's it. I have a shell and you don't. And there's some stuff that's easier for you that's harder for me. Just like I don't know jack about finding shoes because I don't have feet. Caterpillar thinks about this for a second and realizes the snail is right. I mean, he's never had to think about shells or slimy trails, and that's a privilege that the snail has never had because she has to think about that stuff all the time. That's part of being a snail. And it's kind of like that for everyone, right? I mean, we all have our own struggles and challenges, and some of them are small and some of them are huge and really unfair and beyond our control. And a lot of the time, it can be hard to see what someone else deals with because you've never been in their shoes or shell. Like maybe you're gay or trans, have a disability or different religion, or of course the obvious one, you're a member of a different race. I don't know what it's like to be you, and you don't know what it's like to be me. So it's really important to stop and try and see the other side so we can help each other overcome those obstacles together. It's like sometimes you're the snail and sometimes you're the caterpillar. Oh yeah, okay, so then the snail and the caterpillar figured out that if they went to the other side of the garden, they could get through a little break in the fence. And while it took a little longer to get to the party, they did the trip together, which is what made it so great. So they got to the party, the caterpillar hooked up with the ladybug, snail taught everyone how to do the wobble, and the party was everything. The end. This video was illustrated by the very talented and lovely Kat Black and written and narrated by yours truly, Cheska Lee. Please check out Kat's channel and don't forget to subscribe.
To introduce our very special guest speaker, we have Amy McDonald. She's our program director here. And she attended Northwestern State University in Louisiana. She earned her bachelor's in psychology, and she began working with CASA in 2009 after working 11 years at DFPS. Seeing and knowing the difference that our advocates, who are you, make in the lives of children is incredible. And she says that she loves how important that all of you make the children that we serve feel. So again, we're all big fans of everything that you do. So to talk about collaborative family engagement, we have Amy McDonald. So
and Amy, before you begin, again, we've got Pause Creative Group who we consulted with that's taking video today, predominantly to help us recruit more of you. So they have asked if we can take just a couple seconds to laugh.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Well, and I haven't even started talking yet, so here we go. Happy afternoon. There's no rain today. There is some sunshine, so that's all happiness. I'm here to talk today about collaborative family engagement. And I've talked about this in the past, but this is a new initiative for the state of Texas that involves both CASA and Child Protective Services. And I'm not going to get into the whole contracted, so I'm just going to refer to them as CPS today. As you all know, there is a new contractor. It's called 4Kids 4Families that has taken over the role of CPS. But we do still have Child Protective Services in the investigative unit, the child care licensing. They still handle all of those tasks. So I'm just going to talk about them from that aspect today to let y'all know that this is a state initiative. First and foremost, one of the important things is we are receiving funding for this new initiative. So towards the end of my speaking today, I'll explain how all of that gets done in Optima, y'all's favorite, right? So what is collaborative family engagement?
Wait for it.
I'm gonna wait for it.
Okay.
It's the dramatic pause. There we go. This is a partnership, like I said, between CPS and CASA. It's a state initiative. And what it is that we will work together as a team, like we already do, but in a more collaborative environment in regards to like family. So how many of you in here have been to a family group conference? Yes. So these are meetings that are held typically in the beginning of our cases where parents are invited. Anyone that is a support to the family could also be invited. Caregivers, kinship, relatives, and it also involves our lawyers, the district attorney's office, CPS, and the parents, of course. And what we want to do in those meetings is really engage the family to find other family, right? And see who is available to support this family. So we're going to watch a quick video about CFE. How do I play it?
Try pressing the center button and see what happens. Or is that just the laser?
Here we go.
Having meaningful, lifelong connections is one of the factors most closely associated with positive child outcomes. These connections form the child's lifetime network, their community of support. For children in foster care, many or all of these connections have been lost. They may wonder who they belong to and ask, who belongs to me? Without these connections, they may feel more alone, even with all of the professionals around them. Being isolated and experiencing loneliness increases their chance of having difficulty in school, with their mental health, with their peer relationships, and just makes it harder to be happy. So what is Texas doing to ensure young people in foster care are better connected? We are rolling out an integrated approach to family finding called Collaborative Family Engagement, or CFE. And CFE is not business as usual. CFE establishes a true team between court-appointed special advocates, or CASA, and Child Protective Services to identify, locate, engage, and work with family members and other committed adults, so they may be involved in the child's care, planning, and decision-making. CFE teams use a variety of creative tools and techniques that are focused on connection and engagement, with the hope of achieving permanency earlier, bolstering child well-being, and reducing the number of children and youth growing up in the foster care system. The cooperation and sharing of information between CASA and CPS is essential to this process. Not only is this collaboration more effective for the professionals involved, but it also models the team-based approach we'd like families to embrace. CFE recognizes the importance of welcoming supportive and positive adults into the child's life and values their involvement in planning and decision-making. This leads to more family-driven and child-centered plans, the family feeling that their voice is heard, and facilitates the development of natural support and safety networks, because we are all responsible for a child's safety. These connections give children a sense of well-being, belonging, and the best chance at successful outcomes. CFE empowers CASA and CPS to collaborate on one of the most valuable services we can provide for children in our care: the creation of a lifetime network that belongs to the child and that the child knows they belong to, long, long after our services end.
So what do you think about that? I know that's real short, but that kind of explains in a little more detail about what CFE is and how we work together as a team to collaborate, cultivate. What does that mean to you in regards to your CASA kids? What should you be doing to cultivate?
Ask questions.
There you go. Yeah, I'm not going to talk by myself today, so y'all go ahead and speak up. There's a lot of experience in this room. There's a lot of CASA tenure in this room. So when we cultivate relationships for our kids, what does that mean? Who are those people?
Siblings,
Siblings, cousins, grandparents, old teachers, coaches, anybody that was important.
I'm sorry. Does not want to transfer over to, there we go.
Now can I click?
Try it.
There we go. So why are these important? Relationships are important for the healing process. Just like our kids have come from very traumatic families that involve a lot of chaos, a lot of broken relationships, a lot of rejection and mistrust, the same way that they can heal is through relationships. And so, has anybody ever heard of Dr. Cross? Do y'all know who Dr. Cross is? Dr. Cross is very infamous for working out of TCU here in Texas, the Child Institute of Trauma. And he said that problems that are formed in the context of a relationship can only be healed in the context of a relationship. What does that mean for our kids? One of the big things that I always talk about what our advocates do is build trusting relationships with our kids. And how do you do that? You show up. You do what you say you're going to do. You're honest, you're open, and you don't lead kids down the wrong path. You don't give them high hopes of things that you know aren't going to happen. You have to be very forthcoming and honest with them. So as we talk about these tools that I'm going to share with you today, one of the big things is when you sit down with a kiddo or even a parent to do these tools to really kind of research the child's life or the parent's life, that you are open and honest with them with what you're going to do with this information. What are you going to do with it? I'm going to tell you, you should be beating the bushes to find these people for these kids. Our kids need connections. So we want to facilitate the connections. We talk about how important you are in the lives of our CASA kids and how you build those trusting relationships, but we don't want you to be the connection. I'm going to say something right now that a lot of you are going to find controversial, but you are short-term in these children's lives. You are part of the system. You are a part of their short-term life in foster care. So as you work through these things, excuse me, what your task is to go and help build the connections for these kids that will last their lifetime, that will last the family's lifetime, to provide support so that the next time there is a huge family crisis, they have a network in place to help lift them up, to help empower them, to help engage them through the chaos so that it does not require system involvement again. So let's talk about kids and what happens when they're removed from their families. If you take a plant, is anybody out here gardeners? I am. I like to get in the dirt. If you take a plant out of a pot, let's say you pull along the side of a road, I like to do this, and you dig up a wildflower. Some of those are against the law in Texas, by the way.
I love it.
If you dig up a wildflower off the side of the road and you take it home, by the time you get that wildflower home, what's happened to it?
It's in trouble. It's wilted.
It has, all of its roots have been gone. Their roots have dried out. The plant will be totally wilted. This is the same thing that happens to our kids. We take them out of everything familiar to them, and we drop them in a new soil, so to speak, that is unfamiliar. You take them away from their school, their culture, their religion, their family, everything that they know, that's their comfort, the food that is familiar to them. And you drop them somewhere else where they don't know anything. It's very unfamiliar, and it's that in and of itself is traumatizing. So when we talk about culture, what does culture mean? Janie, I'm gonna call on you. What is culture to you? Because I know your background.
Culture is the familiar parameters that we know and that we learn through living.
You have a very big cultural background related to your religion that other people in this room would be unfamiliar with. How does that influence what you cook?
Well, it depends on what time of year it is.
Exactly.
Or who's sick at the time.
Do you mind if I share what your background is? Janie has a Jewish background and grew up with Jewish heritage. So she has a lot of different things that are associated with her culture that's related to her religion. The same thing can go for other ethnicities. Joanna is from Colombia, and so she has a lot of differences in her upbringing that are related to her culture. Can you share things that you don't have here?
Well, I think a very big one is the language. Starting with the language that I grew up. Spanish, food, music, the way that people see family is very different here than in Colombia.
How is that different?
In Colombia, it's very, it's part of our culture for family to be very united. And very big, we have very big, very united families. So it's very rare to see, kids at 18 moving out, or if you've been married, your parents move in. It's always very together. In good ways and not so good ways.
Well, thank you for sharing that. What does culture mean to our CASA kids? One of the things that I always say, I talk about this often because it was brought to my attention many years ago, and I think about it. And if I go to Lars and Andrea's house for Thanksgiving this year, I don't know what they're going to serve. I'm going to guess turkey dressing, all the sides, that kind of thing. If I go to Jean's house and Jean has turkey dressing, all the same things, they're still not going to taste the same because they both have different cultural backgrounds that have added. And that may be family tradition. It may be family recipes that have been handed down throughout generations on why things taste different at Judy's house as opposed to the Gustafsons. And so when you take a kid and you drop them like that little wildflower into brand new soil, that soil is not the same as what it came from. So how do we bring in things and people that are familiar to them to help the wilting leaves and help the roots grow? So why do we do this? First of all, there are very high expectations from the state, the court, that CASA is very thorough in their advocacy. And so when you go through your pre-service training and you learn, what is it, that big book, how many chapters is it? 8 chapters of information that we throw at you in pre-service training is very thorough, right? But the best experience you can get is on the job advocacy, right? So as you meet kids, as you navigate the family that you're working with, you have to know that not one family is familiar or the same as the other family. And the court and the state expects us to be thorough in how we approach advocacy and looking at the best interest for our kids. And finding, contacting, and engaging relatives takes time, resources, and money, all of which you're paid for, right? Out of the goodness of your heart. Family investigation is a duty of CASA and Child Protective Services, which is now 4Kids for Families. Do y'all know that when a child is removed from their family, one of the policies for the state, Child Protective Services, is that they go through their entire computer system and they can contact any relative that has ever been connected to that kid. So when you read an affidavit and you see this list, unfortunately, of all these past CPS cases that this family may have had, CPS, as an investigator, goes through those cases and tries to find relatives that are within the 3rd degree of consanguinity. Say that for me.
3rd degree.
3rd degree of consanguinity. That is a legal term in the Texas Family Code. So it's too hard for me to explain, but that would be down to aunts, uncles, niece, and first cousins. So it's the 3rd degree of relationship. Do y'all understand that?
Yes.
So CPS sends letters to anybody that they had an address for when they remove a kid. And so they are automatically send these letters when children are removed. Now, what the response is, we don't know. And they never share that information with us unless we specifically ask for it. Judy's smirking. You have to ask for that information. And often we get busy trying to build a relationship with our kids and we forget to ask those questions. But we can ask those questions and ask them who they notified of the child's removal. And what do the kids get out of this? If we're out digging and looking for people in their lives, they get the reward of a connection and additional supports. So who's heard this? It takes a village. What does a village mean? Andrea, you're shaking your head, so I'll ask you, what does a village mean to you?
It could be anybody that supports you in the community, not even family really, but church or your neighbors. um, School.
Everybody. So here we go. I'm gonna ask everybody to sit quietly and close your eyes. I want you to think about your childhood. And when you think about your childhood, think about the times that were fun, that created a memory for you, and people that directed you in your life. Think about those people. Who was most important to you when you were little, when you were 10? Who was the most entertaining person that you knew at that age? Jean, tell me somebody that you were thinking about.
My maternal grandfather and my maternal uncle.
Why?
Why? Because they were the most supportive, the most fun, especially the most fun. And they were just always there. And my earliest memories are of them. My mom even was secondary because I was the oldest of 7 children. She was having babies so fast that I was always her favorite child, but she didn't have time for me.
Right. Laura?
My daddy.
Yeah, why?
Because I had 3 older sisters, and I don't know that most people probably wouldn't believe it, but probably at a some age, I was a tomboy. And so we did everything. I had ponies, goats, a donkey. I did outside stuff as well as, the moving company, so we would ride in a truck and move people. He was a great storyteller,
Mhm.
so he read a lot and then he would just make up stories and read me stories.
Miss Phyllis?
I'd have to say, not only my dad, but all of his friends that he was involved with in teaching. You could have a band director that could yo-yo and entertain, besides just teaching his own responsibility. Take you up in the airplane for the first time. He built an airplane.
Wow.
He had the other principal friend of my dad's that we all went skiing together, learned to ski and have those weekends on the lake, with them. And of course, my dad, I just went with him everywhere. He was a K through 8th grade principal, so I was able to go to his school and keep the books for the basketball games. So we had lots of quality road time going back and forth to his extracurricular activity. And Mom took me with her for him to go.
I'll tell you, personally, one of the people that really directed my life and taught me a lot of discipline, I hate using that word, was my piano teacher. And I lost her just a few years ago, but I can still hear her in the metronome in my head. Click, 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 and her telling me, you're not going to get any better if you don't practice, if you don't put in effort. And a lot of the things that she would tell me, I blew off, especially as a teenager, like, I'll practice 10 minutes before my next lesson to make it look like I did something, But she knew me up one side and down the other. I went to her. She was my piano teacher for 13 years. And, her little voice in my head, I hear often. And so she was very important to me, aside from, people like you're talking about. My grandfather was a fisherman on Red River in Louisiana. And I remember as a little girl sitting in the big, huge cooler as people came into the fish market and I would throw the fish. And, you know, things like that. Those are memories that you cherish and that you have about your childhood. Now I want you to close your eyes again. And I want you to picture your CASA kids in your mind. And think about your CASA kids that you're representing right now. What relationships, like you just described, like we just talked about, do they have in their lives? Do they have any of those kind of relationships? Do they have any of those kind of memories? Things that last. So now we're going to carry that. This is the first tool that I'm going to, these are called tools. These are different things that you can do with kids, you can do with parents, you can do with relatives, you can do with kinship that are not blood related. This is how you can make connections for kids. This is called a circle of trust. Has anybody ever seen this before? Jean, you've been to my lecture before.
A few times.
A few times. So first you start off with, I'm just going to point up here. Is that okay, Jerry? You start off with the kid in the middle. And the kid can draw this on a piece of paper. You don't have to have some template. You just take out a sheet of paper with a kid and say, let's talk about who's important to you. And start with the kid in the middle of the circle. And then you talk, as you talk with the kid, you talk about who is in your inner circle. What kind of questions can you ask a kid to find out who is in their inner circle? Let's say it's an 8-year-old.
Who do you talk to the most?
Right. And then you're going to take that name, if it's Grandpa Billy, and you write Grandpa Billy in that inner circle. It can be more than one person. I've done this with numerous kids, and we got all the way out here to who is important to you that you never talked to ever. I learned about a grandfather in California. Like he said, I wish that he was in my life. Really? What's his name? Grandpa? You know, well, then you got to go dig somewhere else. But where do you think, like, a foster parent is going to fit in these circles with your kids? Because that's somebody that they should be relying on, right? What if it's 3 placements ago? It's a foster parent from 3 placements ago. How could that person be involved in this child's life because they meant something to them?
Okay, I got a problem now. Because if you have several placements and you have intellectually challenged placements, should you bring other people up to them?
No.
See, so.
You let the child or the parent, whoever you're doing this with, you let them dictate who's in these circles. Don't say, well, what about me? If they don't name you, you can have your hurt feelings in the car later. If they don't name their CPS caseworker, you can worry about that later. Or their attorney ad litem. It doesn't matter. You let them dictate who do they trust. Because a lot of our kids, the first one I did this with gave me 3 names. And I wasn't one of them. That's that one you just saw. So, were my feelings hurt a little bit? Yeah. But then we came back and we did it like a month later and I said, hey, do you remember us doing this? And that's when I found out about the grandfather in California. Now, it turned out he wasn't that great of a guy. And had done quite a bit of time in prison. So he may not have been a positive influence, but he was somebody important to this kid, this little boy. So I did research it. I did look at it. Like, could this be a connection for this kid? Because he needs positive men in his life. I want to say this. Using the circles of trust is a great tool to use with a parent to encourage them. And also to help them figure out who they have in their circle. Who do they talk to? All that they're doing, they're trying to change their entire life because their children have been taken from them. And we want them to. We want them to change their life. We want them to be safe, drug-free, protective parents. How can we contribute in collaborating with them to put them on a supportive path? This is one of the things that you can sit down. And if you have a mom that has not built a good relationship with you yet, what better way to kind of connect with you and them is to sit down and do something like this. Do y'all have questions about this? Lars, you look intrigued.
No, well, you're talking about. I think to get a good representation of this, you have to have a certain level of trust from the person in the center. And, and you gave an example where, you did it 1 month and you had 3 levels, and a month later, you got even more knowledge, the grand. And so it would seem to me that you could do this initially, but what if you're new to the case and you really haven't developed that level of trust with the individual or individual? In our case, we've got a couple kids, and it would be different each of them. But isn't there a certain level of trust that you have to have in order to get them to respond? I mean, I've never done this, so I'm asking really.
I don't think so. Because it's a way to build trust. As you spend time, you're going to have a one-on-one attention with a kid, with a parent, whoever you're doing this with. And if you sit down and you say to them, I want to know who's in your circle. Who's important to you? And then you go through the levels of the circle. Who do you talk to when you're sad? Who do you talk to? Who was with you when you had your happiest memory? You make up the questions. It doesn't have to be scripted. It's very open conversation. And if you have a teenage boy like you do that doesn't want to do this, say, okay, well, maybe another time. Maybe another time, but I want to know who's important to you. And if you tell somebody that, even a kid, most of the time they're going to sit down and say, oh, well, Coach Smith is important to me. He doesn't make me sit the bench. If you have a kid that plays sports.
So I think the point that I just learned is it is a way of building trust, not just.
It is. Well, anytime that you give a kid or another person one-on-one attention, you're building a trusting relationship because you're not staring at your phone. For God's sakes, please put the phones away when you're with your kids. And make them do the same. It's old school, but it works. You need one-on-one attention. And if you're not making eye contact, then you're not connecting. It's a way to attach.
What's nice about this, it's a non-face-to-face, direct to human text. You're kind of looking at something, you're asking questions, which I think is hard for kids to think back and know.
Yes. it can also be a conversation starter.
Yeah.
For somebody that you don't have a big relationship with, or, you know, an older relationship with. You can use it to help start a conversation. And say, you're just getting to know me, I'm just getting to know you. I want to know who's important to you. And then what do you do with the information that you get from this? That's what's important. Do you go try to find those people? Do you try to talk to the CPS caseworker and say, hey, do you have contact information for Aunt Sally? Because Johnny's talking about Aunt Sally is somebody that's important to him. Does it mean that Aunt Sally is going to come out of this as a placement? No. Would that be ideal? Yes. But could Aunt Sally be somebody that takes him home for Thanksgiving dinner with his own family? Let's bring back the culture into it. The feeling of belonging, the feeling of connecting. How many of you in here have worked with a teenager that was previously adopted and did everything in their power to seek out their birth relatives? I know every one of my staff. These kids look for connections. If we don't help them find healthy ones, they're going to find some that aren't so healthy. So this is another one. Let's see, who am I going to pick on now? Nicole. So this is called the 3 houses. And what you do with the 3 houses is you sit down with a kid. You don't need the template that you have in front of you. Those can be dropped in the link. You don't have to have a template. All you have to have is a piece of paper and a pencil. Let the kid draw a house. And you have 3 houses. And what are we going to talk about in the houses? We're going to put in the first house, house of worries. What are you worried about? Or actually, I'm going to let the kid choose which one they want to do first. House of good things, house of dreams. And we're going to talk about each one of these things. This is really good for younger kids. Science says that you can do this even as young as 4. I think that would be difficult to keep their attention to do this. But Nicole, I want you to pick a kid that you work with and imagine sitting down with them and how would they react to this? And you tell me what they would put in these things. Tell us how old the kid is.
Oh, he's 10 now.
10, and it's a boy. Which house would he pick first?
House of worries.
Worries. What's he worried about?
Returning to where he was removed from.
So going back. Okay. What else is he worried about?
His mom, not getting him back.
Here's the other thing. When a kid tells you something, you use their words. Any other worries?
His brother who's special needs.
Younger or older?
Older. But he was always the protector of him.
Any other worries?
He said he worries about his cussing and his anger.
Well, have you told him that maybe he should do something about that?
Yeah, many times.
Okay. What would he pick next?
That's a good thing.
What's good? What would he say is good?
His current foster mom.
Anything else?
He likes his school
School.
and new friends he's made. Being with his brother because they were almost separated.
Okay.
FaceTime with mom a lot. Talks about his cars and his posters and his artwork.
Oh. What kind of posters?
Different kinds, like, there was a dragon, there was a bear. Typically animals.
Is that what he draws also?
No, he draws different kinds of things, but he can draw animals, but mainly he draws like scenery, like people, places, things, stuff like that.
Okay, how about what are his dreams?
Probably for this all to be over.
How many of your CASA kids would say that? That's their dream? All of them. Anything else?
He has dreams of the future. He'll talk about what he wants to do when he grows up, but changes it every time, so I can't remember. But he has, dreams. He knows he's gonna get big and he's gonna be able to have a job.
We'll say job dreams. Future. Does he want to be an artist
He said that once.
or a programmer for video games? That's what I hear all the boys say.
He never said that. He did say doctor, artist. I want to say he said that a teacher. The changes.
So when he is dreaming for it all to be over, what's his dream for the ending?
Go with mom, but he's not gonna be able to.
Will he say that? Does he verbalize that? Like,
He says he wants to go home to mom. That's not who he was really from though.
we won't get into detail. Anything else?
No, because he's kind of low functioning too, so it's hard to get a lot of stuff out of him.
Mm-hmm. So, right, Jean said, whispered, she got a lot out of him, if this is it. So how could you use this with a kid to help them feel more confident about themselves? The worries is typically the trauma. This is all the positive stuff that we should focus on with our kiddos. Just to kind of get them to look at things, their situation a little bit different. You can do the same thing. I know it seems juvenile, but sit down with a mom, or a dad. I was talking earlier about building a relationship with a parent and trying to help them see their situation currently. If you do this with a mom that's struggling in her services, but really seems to want to engage and want to do better, would this be rewarding for her to sit down and point out, hey, look at what you've got good? And you see it with your own eyes. Let them see it. The same thing with our kids.
And if you continue to encourage them too.
Right. That's an encouragement. Everybody that we're involved with is gonna have this as their dream. If they don't, something's wrong. Everybody wants this to be over. Family, kinship, the kids. Everybody does, the parents. The next one. Do y'all have any questions about the 3 houses. It's just fun.
Yeah.
Lars, it's another conversation piece.
I'm thinking, we've only had 2 cases, and I say only, I think they've been very good cases, and we have now pretty challenging, but it's, and having, a husband-wife team, it works out better than especially this one where Andrea has really come on and as far as, working with the caregiver, and she gets her to open up to say things that I'm thinking, wow, this is something that Andrea, the caregiver, could go over. And, and she's not a real, the caregiver's is guarded. And she'll talk, but you have to kind of ask the right question. I was thinking, everything you're talking about is just awesome, This here, I'll put the hand your ass. This is something that you could do with the caregiver. That would really, because it seems, we're told to work with the kids and to find out, I think it was build trusting relationships with the kids. The kids need connections. That's pretty much what I wrote down. But it's also the caregiver. In both of our cases, the caregiver is also needing somebody to talk to. And in both cases, Andrea has just developed those relationships with, and it's always a lady, typically. It doesn't always have to be a lady, but it helps having, with Andrea can develop that relationship, because the caregivers have a lot of struggles. And I know we're to work with the kids, but I find that we also spend time a lot with the caregiver because they need help understanding things too.
How are you going to represent the best interest of a kid if you only build a relationship with the child? You need a relationship with every single person in their world to know. Keely is one of the CASA supervisors here. And what I know of Keely is very different than what her sister knows of Keely. So if I don't get to know Keely's sister, do I know the real Keely? It's just like Nicole was talking about this 10-year-old little boy and his brother. If you don't get to know the brother, do you know this kid? Because that was his protector. You need to know everybody and have some sort of relationship with everybody in this child's world. Who else does that include?
School teachers.
Teachers. What if it's an old neighbor? An old neighbor. I mean, neighborhoods are not what they used to be. I'm going to age myself. I'm old. I mean, everybody used to know their neighbors, right? You used to be able to call on your neighbor and take over an empty measuring cup and say, I need some sugar. Do you have any eggs? Do you know who all your neighbors are right now? No. I know one on one of my sides. I've waved at the other people. They just don't. They just wave back. I've tried walking towards them and they close the garage door. So that was kind of my signal. I'll stay in my yard. So, people are not as engaging as they used to be. But kids are kids. Kids are fun. You have people, there's nobody in here that's a retired teacher, right? Oh, Janie is, sorry. Phyllis, were you? I'm sorry. I've heard more retired teachers come be CASA volunteers and have this statement. There was a kid that really impacted me that was one of my students, and CPS took him and he disappeared and I never got to know what happened to him. I've heard many teachers say that. And that's why they came to be a CASA, so that they knew what happened to that kid. So we're going to talk about the tree of life, and I'm going to tell you this is my favorite. It is a lot more comprehensive than these other two tools that I showed you. And because of that, I'm going to show you a video on the how-to. But what do you do with this tree? You have a kid draw a tree. Pretty easy. Make sure there's roots, a trunk, branches, and leaves. And as you draw this, you're going to talk with the child about different parts of their life. And I say child, you can also do this with an adult. You could do this with a parent. You could do it with a caregiver. But the purpose is to reflect on what's made you, who you are today, to think about what you're doing and explore what you want to do in the future. It's a way to connect a kid really to their own background. So I'm going to skip this because that's a lot of reading, and we're going to watch the video. Wow. What is this?
In this movie, we will introduce
Loading.
the tree
I paused it, sorry. Stupid.
of life, which is based on narrative therapy. The stories we tell ourselves have a great impact on who we are. If our dad praised us when we caught a fish, maybe we believe we are great at fishing. If our mom often lies to us, we might believe that lying is not a big deal. If our grandparents told us we are patient and kind, we might tell ourselves that we are patient and kind. With this tool, we will bring to the fore the positive stories the parent or child tells about themselves. The child or parent will talk about their past in a non-traumatizing way. It helps the parent or child to figure out who they believe they are and who they want to be. It helps us find those people who have or had a positive impact on the parent or child's life while helping to build up their character and positive identity. In this movie, we will explore this method. The parent or child starts by drawing their own tree. It should contain the roots, the ground, trunk, branches, leaves, fruits, and seeds. Each of these represent a different component of their life. If they would prefer not to draw their own tree, you can give them a picture of a pre-drawn image. The parent or child will start with filling in the roots. Ask them, where do you come from? What town, country? What language did you learn to speak? What culture did you grow up in? Who taught you the most in life? What was your favorite place, music, dance, club, sports team, etc.? Write these all down in and on the roots of the tree. On the ground component of the tree, the child or parent writes or draws where they currently live and how they like to spend their time. Ask, what kind of activities do you do over the course of a week that you enjoy? On the trunk, the child or parent writes down what they value. Questions should include, when you look at the ground and see what you do during the week, think of what inspires you to do those things. What do you care about? They may also add skills and abilities they have. Those can be accomplishments or practical experiences like cooking or cleaning, but it can also be skills like caring, being honest, being kind, etc. If they can't think of anything they would put here, it might be helpful to have them think of what a friend of theirs would say about them, or they can add something that their group of friends is good at or values. Further ask, the values, abilities, and skills you added to your trunk, where did they come from? Maybe they want to add something or someone to their roots. Thus, the parent or child starts building connections between the different parts of their tree. The branches represent their horizons. The parent or child writes down their hopes, dreams, and wishes. It can be hopes and dreams for their own lives as well as for others, or for their community. It can be a wish for something to happen tomorrow, or a hope for something to happen a long time from now. We can then talk about these hopes and dreams. Where do they come from? Did someone introduce you to them? Do you share these hopes and dreams with someone else? How long have you had them? While pondering these questions, the parent or child might want to make additions to their roots or trunk. The leaves represent those who are significant to the child or parent in a good way. It may be people they meet often or hardly ever. They may be alive or have passed away. It can be heroes, pets, or invisible friends. Whoever is close or has influenced them directly may be included. It may be helpful to add an occasion of a good or special time they had with another person, and to add what is or was significant about this person. They can write those things next to the leaves. The fruits represent the gifts that the child or parent has received. These can be material gifts or gifts of character, like patience or courage. A question to ask would be, when you look at the people you put on the leaves, what have they given you? Flowers and seeds represent gifts or legacies the parent or child wants to pass on to others. They might want to pass on those gifts that they have received. Maybe a teenager received a gift of a fishing rod from his father and caught a fish with it, which made him feel great. Maybe he wants to pass on the skill of fishing to his friend or younger brother. It can also be that there is something that the parent or child has never received, something that they wish they had gotten, and that they do want to pass on to others. If, for example, they are always lied to by their mother, maybe they come to the conclusion that they value the truth and want to pass on the gift of honesty. After the parent or child creates the tree of life, see if they can find the connections between the different parts. Are the roots, trunk, and branches flowing into each other? Pay special attention to what the parent or child puts on their trunk. Ask them if they can tell you about this or that value. When was it significant for you? If they, for example, put patient and kind on their trunk, you might want to ask them, how do you try to be patient and kind? This might lead to adding things to their roots or adding people to their leaves. The tree and the connections between its different parts creates a storyline. It's a preferred story of who the child or parent is. It helps the parent or child move on from feeling that they have a problem or that they are their problem to finding their positive identity. The Tree of Life is a narrative method co-developed by Nkazelo Incube Imlilo and David Denborough. This very popular approach is used around the world with traumatized adults and children. For more information about narrative therapy and the Tree of Life method, we highly recommend this book by David Denborough. Click the link in the description below for more information. We hope you
About that.
have enjoyed watching this video.
I'm trying to go back. Hang on.
We wish you success in learning more about the
Stop it where I can show.
children and families you work with. Keep looking for how to reconnect.
I'll just move on.
Can you just move that little red?
Yeah, I'm just gonna do this instead. I wanted to show y'all how intricate these can get. So these aren't great pictures, but because I've stolen from the internet, but these are pictures of examples of trees that have been done like with a kid or a parent or a caregiver, somebody that's important to your family. And one of the things that I think is so important if you do this with a child or teenager is to show them with this one, look how many roots you have. Look how big and wide that trunk is. Look how strong you are. Just to reiterate to this kid that they aren't nobody. They're something. How much fun would it be to do this with a kid and then bring them up here to the CASA office and see the giant pine tree out by our playground? Have any of y'all ever walked out there? You can't even wrap your arms around that pine tree. It is enormous. I think it's the biggest pine tree trunk that I have ever seen. Do this and take the kid to that tree and show them your tree is as strong as this one. Look at what you are, how strong you are. What plays into this kid? It's all of these things. You can get really intricate, and don't think this is a one-time, I gotta sit down and do a tree with a kid. Don't do that. You can do a little bit every time. If you want something, a conversation starter, something to engage with the child and help them tell you their story, start with the roots. Where'd you come from? Tell me where you came from. Where did you live? What's the name of the town? What's the name of the apartment complex? You know, things like that may be important to your kid. It goes back to that thing that you learned in pre-service, that you never know what's important to that child unless you ask them. Their favorite meal could be ramen noodles. And if you don't ask, you never know. These can be really, really intricate. Let's go back to, here's options of more things that you can do with these trees. You can put the clouds in. What are the clouds? Well, they're obstacles. What are your challenges? What are their fears? Instead of doing this, you add in, what's your favorite music? Or you have a kid that's into music, that's musically inclined. I don't know how many kids we've had that have lost their guitars from one placement to another. And then, of course, it's the old negative leaf pile, the compost pile. That's the junk. The junk that we don't want in our tree. The junk that got in there, everything negative, the trauma. And it's a way to show them that that is outside of them. It's not part of them. So you go back to, oh, didn't y'all, I loved the little seed at the top. I don't think it's on the one. Is it on the one I gave you?
No.
The little seed at the top, how do you want other people to, what do you want to give other people? How many of our kids think that they have anything to give? How many of our parents think that they have anything to give others? Has anybody heard of the parent collaboration group? Do y'all know what this is? Johnny, do you want to tell them about that a little bit?
Sure. At least in Van Zandt County, that's all I know about. Parent collaboration group, it's a support group for parents. It is led by a former parent who has successfully completed the program, gotten their children returned. Parents come to this group. In Van Zandt County, they're required to attend 2 sessions. And it's really, truly just a support group. They can come there and they can complain about CPS. They can complain about the things that are not happening in their case. Why is this parent getting extra visits and I'm not? It just kind of helps them understand how things work. So it's been pretty successful in Van Zandt County.
What's it called again?
Parent collaboration group. And every county is supposed to be conducting them. How it's working right now with the new contractor, I'm not sure. But it's something that the state was requiring. So if you have a parent that has made progress, is doing well, is positive, that's somebody that you want mentoring another parent who's not. Maybe they can pull them up by the bootstraps and say, hey, let's get to work. And their motivation will mean something different than yours. So let's talk about confidentiality with this. So as you do these activities with kids or families, if you go back to that circle of trust and you find Grandpa Jones is in that second or third circle, and you ask the parent, who is Grandpa Jones? Johnny talked about Grandpa Jones and says that he was somebody he would like to talk to. The parent or relative is probably going to give you an earful about who that person is, why they should or should not be involved. But what do you do with it? Can you get Grandpa Jones' phone number and call him and say, hey, I'm Jean Cox, I'm Johnny's CASA, and he's been talking about you. How would you feel about being a part of his life or having contact with him? Now, of course, before Jean gets to that point, hopefully you've collaborated with CPS, and we've already done a background check on Grandpa Jones, and we know that he's an okay fella, not a fellow. And we know that he is somebody, let's say, that used to take the kid fishing. What would it mean to little Johnny for Grandpa Jones to come pick him up from wherever he is and take him fishing again? What is that? We're going back to the beginning of this discussion when I asked you to think about your memories as a child, people that were positive for you, and then turn around and think about your kids, your CASA kids, and how important might that 2-hour time fishing with Grandpa Jones might be. We don't know. Is your kid getting in trouble? Is he suspended at school? Is he fighting? Could this be something that is a reset? Who knows? But as you visit with Grandpa Jones, can Jean tell him everything about the case?
No.
No, why not? He's Grandpa Jones.
Don't matter, it's still confidential.
It is confidential. He can, if he wants to know information, you can invite him to a court hearing. He can come sit in the courtroom and listen. We cannot make confidentiality mistakes. These are not our stories to tell. These are the family stories to tell. If I go out in the community and I know Jenny is in the middle of a divorce and I go out and sorry, I'm actually doing it right now. If I go out and tell her whole story about why her family is splitting and what led to that and all that, is that my story to tell? No, that's Jenny's. Sorry, Jenny, I just kind of did it anyway, sorry.
Oh, if you know a story, just ask.
You can tell something on her.
But that's not fair to Jenny that I just disclose that, right? I should have asked her permission first, but we don't even ask permission from our families to share their stories, because when you are appointed as CASA, you agree to confidentiality for all these families. It is not your story to share, even with Grandpa Jones. If Grandpa Jones wants to know the story of why little Johnny is in foster care and nobody called him and told him, I would suggest that you talk to your niece or your daughter or whoever the mother is. You need to have a heart-to-heart with your relative, Johnny's mom, Johnny's dad, and get the story from them. Okay. So all of this to say what? I said in the beginning of our training today, this is a new initiative. What comes with initiatives? Money. It's funding. And so how do you help us achieve funding from using any of these things? Everybody goes into Optima and you do contact logs. When you do a contact log, I'm sorry I didn't screenshot it. When you do a contact log and you click on that box that says activity, surely y'all know what all those activities are. Can you name them for me?
But not all of them. You mean the ones where it's like face-to-face contact, contact with CPS,
Yes.
contact
That's one of them.
with placement.
That is one of them.
That is CFE tool. CFE family meeting. Family and child connections. So if Jean does I'm gonna use you, sorry. If Jean sits down with little Johnny and does the circles of trust. So what is she gonna choose? On her Optima log?
CFE tool.
CFE tool. And then she'll put, you know, where you type in circle of trust with Johnny, how much time you were at that visit, and a little description. You don't necessarily have to put a whole lot in there, a sentence or two. I learned about Grandpa Jones. Next, Jean's gonna talk to the parent, which is parent contact, and get Grandpa Jones' information. That's a separate contact log. Talk to mom, got Grandpa Jones' phone number, address, date of birth. Got it? And then when Jean calls and talks to Grandpa Jones, it's gonna be, we've made a connection for the child. If that's a lot to remember, your supervisors are supposed to catch them as they read your contact logs and make sure that the activity is correct. Right, staff?
Are we gonna get a copy of this?
You can.
What the funding will be based on, how much you can.
Yes. So I, as the program director here at CASA, I'm responsible to do a lot of our statistical reporting. And so what you may or may not understand is your contact logs. I look at all those contacts. I have to pull numbers out of those. How many hours? So be accurate. The majority of you are not. And I know this because I know that Phyllis drove 2 hours and spent 3 hours with the kids and then drove 2 hours home. And her contact log says 2 hours. But I did the paperwork to reimburse her travel. And I know that she drove 190 miles. So be accurate. When you do your contact logs and your time, it is on a 15-minute, I know this is really confusing for a lot of people. It's on 15-minute intervals, but you calculate it 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, and 1 hour. Is this a lot?
No, you're fine.
I'm getting some confused looks. But when I pull statistics for our grant reports and to report to the state of Texas for HHSC, which is Health and Human Services Commission, that's the big umbrella that's over all the human services in the state of Texas. They look at all of this and they look at what we are doing as an organization and as a state. What is CASA doing in Texas? And so they pull this. I turn in all these numbers. We keep track of how many kids are what age, how many placements, how long kids have been in care. I mean, you name it, and I report it. So when you do your contact logs, it's not just so that if you go on vacation in Alaska and get killed by a bear, we know what you want us to do for a kid.
We have a question from Zoom. Isn't reimbursed travel not to be counted in the overall contact time?
That's separate.
It's not
Put down separate.
Yes.
Did you say miles or not? Put down separate.
Who asked that question?
I'm not outing anyone.
Confidential. I put the miles in there whether I ask for reimbursement or not.
You only supposed to put the miles.
Oh, I just think about that back. I've got time and
That's a question for your supervisor. Yes.
Can I clarify for them that they're already doing some of that CFE family meetings? When CPS, the parents are involved, like.
Yes.
At home.
Let me say this.
FGC, PC.
This is a new terminology for something that we've already taught you to do, which is find relationships for kids. This is not something new. This is best practice. These tools, these fun little activities, these may be new to you, but asking the questions and having the conversations are not new. Janie, I can remember a case several years ago where she sat down with a grandmother and ended up finding the auntie out in Chapel Hill. I may be getting those confused, but and that's who ended up with the kids permanently. This is not new work. It's new little fun things to figure out and try to navigate. But the whole idea of engaging the family, the parents in the child's life and foster care, this is not new. It has a new name. And we have some new fun things to get the conversation started. When you go to family meetings, I'll get right to you. When you go to a family meeting, this is just a new name for it. It's still a family meeting. It's still a permanency conference, but because the parents are involved, it has a new name. If you have a kid in a kinship placement, make sure that your placements are aware of meetings, court hearings. They have a right to be involved in all of those things. Plus, they're the caregiver for the kid. And they don't have to be a blood relative. What if Grandpa Jones ended up to be a great possible placement for Johnny, for that kid, to get him out of a foster home? How amazing would that be? You never know what you're going to dig up. Let's talk about internet searches. Has anybody ever searched on the internet? That's a tool. Y'all know there's all of these paid search sites on the internet that if you run somebody's name through it and it will say, ooh, we found, 47 files on Jane Smith. And you think, oh gosh, should I pay $3.99 for it for one? There are a lot of those that if you run it and don't pay, it's gonna have a list at the bottom of any possible relatives. And it's free. You just have to find the right website.
And half the time it's wrong. I have relatives listed for me that I've never heard of in my entire life.
Well, Shelby.
Yes, that's right.
So using the internet, has anybody ever looked on social media for your kids? Or for the parents? And do you look at the first page to see who the relatives are? There are a lot of relatives that some of our families won't tell us about. Can you guess why?
I want their family to know what's going on.
If I was addicted to meth, I wouldn't want my family to know. You know, if I lost my job because I was on drugs, I wouldn't want my family to know. I wouldn't want to hear the lectures, to be honest.
Sure wouldn't want my family to know if I lost my kids.
Right. So I'd be portraying all over Instagram or Facebook, you know, my own selfies. I'm looking good. I'm having a good time. Here's pictures of my kids. And tell nobody.
Actually, in the CPS. It's taken.
Right. So you never know. Use the internet. And if you use the internet, you just did another one of these. The tool. It's an internet search.
Does that count criminal? If you look at-
Yep. So here's a place that you can find, there's lots of places. If you go Google CFE Texas, all of this will come up. The YouTube videos that you watched today, that Tree of Life one, I have to watch it every time I go do it. Just as my own reminder, because I get lost in the story. Texas CASA has a YouTube site themselves that has a lot of videos on it for collaborative family engagement. It also has lots of training videos that you can watch if you're behind CEUs for the year, right? There's also a CFE app in your mobile store if you want to download it that can help you.
In your mobile store?
On your phone.
All over.
On your phone.
No.